Welcome back, DIVEBOMB IndyCar Podcast, and once again we have another familiar face on the show. It is Will Buxton, commentator for Fox Sports. Will, it's a pleasure to have you back on. How have you been? Just returned from Buxton, as you've told us, so keeping busy, I must hear.
Yeah, I had a week back in America. I figure there's an open wheel race in America, so I should be there, really, shouldn't I? It was nice going back to my old haunts and catching up with a bunch of people I've not seen for a while, so that was lovely. Ran into Hinch a lot, which was good, and yeah, it was really, really nice. But basically, the last, where are we now? 6 weeks since the end of the season have been incredibly busy. I've managed to move house twice. My wife is about 2 weeks away from giving birth, and it has been pretty full on. So yeah, non-stop, boys, non-stop.
You're saying this to us off camera, like the F1 off-season, you sort of end in December, pre-season testing starts in mid-February, you're racing in March, and here in IndyCar, we ended at the end of August, and we're already 2 months down the line, but we still have another 4 months to go. So how do you prepare an off-season so long where you just have so much time to do things?
Well, this is it. I'm used to getting home at the end of a season. My wife and I used to take a week in Dubai after the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix and have a holiday. So we'd get back to the UK with about 4 days to go until Christmas. I remember sat on my couch after the IndyCar season and I looked at the calendar and I had 4 months until Christmas. It's a lovely place to be in. So what am I doing? I'm watching a lot of American football. Because the IndyCar on Fox boys pulled me into their fantasy league. So I now have to try to properly learn what football is all about, because I managed to make my team without having really much of a clue what I was doing. The results have gone the way you would absolutely expect, and I'm terrible at it. So yeah, I picked a kicker in the 4th round and then picked another kicker in the 5th round. So I've got 2 really good kickers, which I thought I would be able to trade, for a decent running back or a wide receiver. And no one will trade with me. So I am stuck with 2 brilliant kickers and an utterly terrible team. So I will know for next year.
Well, we asked this to Louis Foster last week, and I feel like we must ask you the same question. What sport is football to you nowadays?
Oh, don't. It's so bad. It's so bad, right? It depends. So when I say football, depends on the audience. It entirely depends on the audience. When I'm with my friends from back at home, football is football, right? But when I'm with my American friends, football is hand egg. So yeah.
Yeah, you need to drag them into a fantasy Premier League. That needs to be the next goal.
So I am trying to explain to them why fantasy Premier League works so much better than fantasy American football. Because for those who don't know, you basically have I think 100 million at the start of the season, and in the off season you pick your squad. So you pick 2 goalkeepers, 5 defenders, 5 midfielders, 3 attackers, and then you can essentially make your team each week, 1 goalkeeper, and then determine your formation. So you can have 3 defenders up to 5 defenders. You can have 3, 4, 5 midfielders, 1, 2, 3 attackers until you have your full team of 11 players on pitch. So it's really great. It's quite complex. You get to swap players out and bring players in dependent on the value of your team, and then each player scores points. But you're not limited. If one of your mates' teams has got a player, doesn't mean you can't have that player. Everyone's got Erling Haaland. Everyone's got Mo Salah, right? Apart from me, I sold him because he was being really rubbish this season.
I never started. I avoided him.
Yeah, I wildcarded week 8, and I got rid of Salah. But then I made a couple of massive errors as well with the wild card, so I think I've actually lost points. But for once, I'm not bottom of my fantasy football league. I'm bottom of the fantasy American football league, but it's taken me a clear sort of 7 seasons with my mates of playing actual fantasy Premier League for me to get anywhere near respectable. So hopefully I get a bit better at fantasy American football in a shorter space of time.
In Fantasy Premier League, I'm currently top of the Dive Bomb League, so I've got almost 100 points in archery already. So I've had a great start. So
There we go.
Oh
long may
no.
it continue. Yes,
So
excellent.
I'm just going to say, Fantasy Premier League works in pretty much the same way as Fantasy IndyCar does on Grid Rivals. Very similar kind of way of doing it.
I'll get involved for next season. We'll make a Dive Bomb League for next season if they do leagues, and everybody can join it.
I will be on that.
Excellent. Let's move on to the IndyCar front. Gives us a nice little front there. It was obviously the first season with Fox, the first season you moving over to the States to do the commentary side of things. So just as a general perspective, how do you look back on how the season went as a whole?
Wow. I think we've all got a lot to be proud of. But I also think we're all only too keenly aware of everything that we want to improve, and from probably about halfway through the season, we were, putting together a document that had everything that we wanted to change, everything that we wanted to improve, everything that we wanted to really work on, from the broadcast perspective, from shoulder content perspective, literally everything you can think of, down to little things like the shading of some of the colors on some of the graphics that we used. And, that's the kind of the level of detail we were going down into on things we wanted to change and things we wanted to impact. I think when you bring together a group of people for the first time, it's always going to be tough, and it's always going to be a period of immense learning for everybody, no matter their experience, no matter their background. And we were really lucky that we had an amazing team being brought together who had such a wealth of experience in so many sports that they were able to bring so many ideas and so many influences together. But it always takes time. It always takes time for it to find its feet. I know I personally found time to find my feet, and sod's law, you just start to find your feet and get yourself into a really good place. And then there's like 2 races to go, and then you've got 6 months off. But that 6 months you can then spend putting in or putting through kind of like all of the things that you want to change and you want to set in place for the next season. I think we can be really proud of the numbers. And I mean really proud of the numbers. And I don't think this has got enough press, and I don't think it's made enough headlines. But I think our figures for season 1 are unbelievably positive. 1.3 million average for the year. A 7.5 million average for the Indy 500 and 8 million max on that means it is the most watched race of the season, regardless of motorsport category in America. And I'm really, really proud of that. And I was talking to some people in the F1 paddock about that. And of course, F1 got a 1.1 million average for 2024. So our average, beat that for the season. And a couple of people said, oh yeah, but a lot of that has to do with the Indy 500. And I said, okay, what? So are you going to take Miami out of the F1 US figures? Or are you going to take Monaco out of the American US? Like, it's a season. Some races are more popular than others. And yes, IndyCar has one race which is insanely popular compared to all of the others, but that's the lay of the land. Even if you took the 500 out and you worked out an average for the season, I still think there's a lot to be proud of. And moreover than that, I think what this season has done primarily is it's given Fox and it's given the US a really good idea of what its baseline is. And that's important for a number of reasons. This is year 1 for IndyCar on Fox. It's number 1 for the Fox's relationship with IndyCar. And of course, we had the amazing news midway through the season that Fox has invested and has taken part ownership in the championship. And that's absolutely massive. And the correlation between, Fox doing that, what Liberty did with F1 in terms of a massive media organization, taking ownership and will be taking a real lead in how the sport is marketed and promoted, and all of their knowledge, all of their history, everything that they're brilliant at, bringing that to bear for this championship. This is only the beginning. And I went back and I looked at the F1 figures because I used to broadcast on Speed Channel and NBC doing Formula One. And in those days, we were getting 400, 500,000 viewers average per race. When Formula One moved to ESPN, those numbers stayed static. They didn't move. They stayed at around 500,000 for the first 3 seasons. And it was in season 4 where you had the first leap, and then season 5 where they finally sort of went over 1 million. So when I look at that, when I look back, I think, okay, those 3 years, I was with Liberty. I saw the investment. I saw the amount of money. I saw the amount of employment that was done in marketing, in digital, the setting up of F1 TV, which hadn't really existed. You had the pit lane channel, but you didn't have F1 TV until those days. You know, that was absolutely massive. And still, you didn't see any shift in the needle for 3 years. So if this year was just about finding that base level of where the fanaticism is in the US, and let's say it's somewhere between 800, 900,000, that's already way higher than the base level that F1 had before Liberty Media's injection into it. So I see that as tremendously positive, and as having, or what we should have as tremendous kind of optimism for the future. Because if our base level is at that level, then once this momentum starts to carry, and once the seeds that we've planted this year are given water and light and the chance to grow, then where this sport could find itself in 3, 4, 5 years time is a really exciting place to be. But the headline figure of 1.3 million, that is legit. People haven't made enough of it. People love to complain, and so often this year I saw the sky is falling type headlines after races, depending on what the figure had been. But the average for the year of 1.3 million, I think it's an incredibly positive story at the end of the year.
And kind of, I mean, you've obviously talked a lot about the rating elements there, but I guess away from that, is there anything else you kind of come away from the season viewing as like the overwhelming biggest success, whether that's on I don't know how the Fox coverage has been received, something that kind of Fox has brought to the series as well? What's the biggest thing that you view, other than maybe that kind of numbers side, as the major success?
I think our ability to change, our ability to react has been really, really good. Race 1, the fan base made it very clear they didn't like the illustrative driver profiles, and they were changed within a week. I really liked them, but the fan base seemingly didn't, which I thought was a shame. I thought they were great. They went, and watching the broadcasts back, as I have done since the end of the season, is fascinating to watch, and for me to look at them and just see the little things that changed every week and every race, and notice how much work was actually going on behind the scenes that people might not have noticed. So I think that ability to react, that ability to grow immediately, to listen to feedback, and to implement that, I think that was a tremendous positive. I think I have to thank the guys in the booth for being as open and welcoming as they were. I think, we've had this chat already, and I'm my own biggest critic, but I don't think I really found my feet properly, or found a place that I was really happy with, probably until Milwaukee. I think first half of the season I was too tight. Second half of the season I maybe got too loose. And then Milwaukee, I think I Goldilocks it. I got it I think I kind of hit it at Milwaukee. But again, I'm going back and I'm rewatching everything and figuring out what I could have done better. 95% of everything I think I could have done better. But it's I think it's like any rookie season, any rookie in any sport. And we were rookies as Fox, but I was a rookie myself. You put so much pressure on yourself, and often it's only when you kind of take a little bit of that pressure off, and that usually comes in year 2, that you can kind of allow yourself to flourish and find that place to grow. So I can't wait. I can't wait for St. Pete. I just, if St. Pete was next week, I'd be so happy, because I just want to jump back in. I want to get back in that booth and bring to bear everything I've learned this year, be a bit more loose, be a bit more kind of confident in myself more than anything. And the fact that I've done a season now, and I know the flow a bit better now.
And it's funny you mentioned being loose. That made me think of the when you guys started filling for the international feed during the commercial breaks. Whose idea was that? Where did that come from? Because that was genius. Because a lot of the time in those practice sessions, qualifying sessions, we're just subjected to silence in the past.
Yeah.
So where did that come from?
I don't know whose idea that was. Pam, our producer, just one day she said, "Oh, by the way, we need you to fill the commercial breaks for the international audience." And we were like, "Okay." And it got quite confusing because we'd forget whether we were on break or whether we were in the main part. And then if we came back to the main part, had we discussed that bit already? Had we only discussed it on the international break? And it was like, do we bring up new elements in the international break, or do we need to save those for the main show? And so there was a lot of kind of twisting our melons around that part of the show, which was, I think, in the end, we kept those bits really loose and just kind of had fun with it because it made it a bit easier than kind of trying to continue on like normal, and then find ourselves getting totally bewildered and confused when we came back. But that was good. I'm glad you guys enjoyed it. It was certainly the more kind of off the cuff, and for folks in America who didn't hear that. There was a lot of randomness that took place during those commercial breaks.
Yeah, that was such good fun. But yeah, it's intriguing to me. Like you say, you've obviously already kind of looked back through all the broadcasts. So when you kind of look back to St. Pete in particular, or even think back to St. Pete from, say, a perspective from where you were in Nashville, or even now, like, how do you feel looking back at where you were that first weekend yourself, the entire Fox team, and just has that journey of growth been?
It's night and day. It's absolutely night and day. It's imagine. Do you know what? It's. I think I said this to you guys at the outset that we were kind of Prema this year. We were a brand new team, and we also had a rookie as one of the headliners in that team. And he got pole at the 500, mega. But by the end of the year, that team, the consistent form that they were showing in races, the results that Callum was able to pull out, towards the end of the year, those giant killing results, with the evidence of the hard work that had gone on, how much the team had learned, how much they bedded themselves in. There were difficulties. The whole thing set itself on fire at Thermal Club. Brilliant parallel, because we lost a truck, in the whole broadcast. There was a very good comparison, us and Prema, throughout the year. But it's a massive task, setting up a team. You bring in people with IndyCar experience, you bring in people with experience from other championships. You have one driver who's a rookie, another who's got, a really good amount of experience there. And that was kind of me and Townsend and Hinch. We were so lucky to have Kevin and Georgia on pit lane. But again, we had Jack, who was a rookie, on pit lane as well. And I thought Jack, and we discussed this already, but Jack, I think, was one of the biggest finds and one of the biggest successes of the year. I think he was absolutely wonderful. And just, relaxed into his role as the year went on and grew with confidence, all the way through. But it's, I think the first season is, you got to survive the first year and lay the foundation work in that first year of where you'll go and what you'll do in year two. So, really, I'm just super proud of everybody. And the great thing with it is we became a family very, very quickly. Even from St. Pete, the relationships between everybody were really, really good. And there was a real camaraderie and a real feeling that we were a part of something special, and that we had a responsibility together, to really try and take this sport that we all love and take it on to its future. And we all felt that responsibility right from the outset. But, from day one, it was just a brilliant kind of family atmosphere that existed between everybody. And that's only got stronger, through the year. And it feels really weird not seeing everybody. It feels really, really strange.
When we look back across the course of the year, is there any particular moments that really stand out to you? Maybe an on-track bit of action or something from the broadcast booth that stands out? Is there anything you look back on a couple of years' time where that really stood out to me?
Going to commercial break with a Joseph Newgarden hero shot. And as we were doing that, I pick up a piece of pizza because you have to get your food down you quickly during a commercial break just to try and keep the energy levels up. So I got a piece of pizza in one hand. There's the Joseph Newgarden hero shots playing. He's leading. And then suddenly we hear the, I think it was Mitch or Pam or both are screaming in my ears going, we're coming back, we're coming back, we're coming back. They cut the hero shots and Joseph's upside down, skidding down the track. That will stick in the memory for a very, very long time. You know, couldn't write it. You couldn't make it up. That was a moment. You know, I think Rasmussen's win, I think, was one of my favorite moments of the entire year. I just loved the way that he raced, and there'd been that feeling all the way through the year that it was going to be a Rasmussen or a Daly or a Ferrucci or a Malukas on a short oval who was going to take a first win. You know, it was going to be one of those guys. And there was just that real feeling bubbling through the paddock. And we talked about it so much on commentary, and watching Rasmussen scythe through the fields and then watching him lap cars, you know, probably taking bigger chances than he had when he'd been passing everybody to get into the lead, was just astonishing. And that was a joy. That was great fun. It was my favorite call of the year. It was probably my favorite race of the year. And I felt that weekend, that was a moment where you could see the work that had gone on through the season. And I really feel like, as a broadcast, as a commentator, for me, just as a team, I just feel like that was maybe our strongest race of the season. Thought it was, you know, and to have that as kind of the penultimate race of the year, you want to be, you know, you want to be improving as the year goes on. So yeah, that was probably my favorite moment of the year.
And people who follow you on social media will be aware of Will's Cultural Tour of America. So
Will's Cultural Tour of America, you bet.
What is the highlight from it, or what are some of the highlights from it? What are the biggest things on that tour that have really stood out to you?
Chocolate covered gummy bears, taste sensation. Absolutely. You see, here's the problem with Will's Cultural Tour of America. Will's Cultural Tour of America has meant that now I have 6 months back at home. I've had to join a gym because I put on a ton of weight. And I have a 2-year-old daughter, and I have a new baby coming in a couple of weeks. So I've kind of, you know, I've got to be running around the place, and carrying all that Twinkies and Twizzlers weight is not a good thing. I think maybe the fact that in my first season of supporting the Blue Jays, because that was the first baseball match I went to, and the guys took me when we were in Toronto, and now they're in the World Series. So that's great news. I've loved it, you know. I've loved the Cultural Tour of America. And what's been really fun for me is, after 25 years of traveling the world and going to, you know, different countries and discovering different cultures, this has been for me a real eye-opener, because America is the world in one country. You know, you go state to state, and it's like going from country to country. They're that disparate, they're that different. The accents are so strong that you could feel you were in a completely different country, but the cultures are unique. The food is incredibly different depending on where you go. The music is different. The architecture is different. The topography is different. The weather is different. It is an entire world within one country. So the Cultural Tour of America was, you know, it's been a bit of fun, and mostly kind of derived around sweet treats and gas stations the size of an amusement park in the case of a Buc-ee's. But that's been one of my favorite parts of this year, has been the Cultural Tour. And legitimately, like for real, has been one of the fun parts, because I've visited parts of America I never thought I'd go to, and I've never been to, and states I've never been to, and cities I've never been to. Like, have you seen the state capitol in Des Moines? It's absolutely stunning. It's like something out of Eastern Europe. I mean, you could find it in Prague or Tallinn or you know, anywhere kind of Estonia, Czech Republic, anywhere east. It's absolutely beautiful. Was not expecting that. There's a lot I haven't expected about those cities, so that's been a huge amount of fun.
And have you kind of converted to a country music fan, adopted any of that?
Not yet. T3, our head of security, he's a big Jelly Roll fan, so he's been trying to get me into Jelly Roll, and I'm almost there. I'm not quite there. Even having spent a week in Nashville, I'm still not quite there on the country music thing. I still don't like barbecue either. That's a problem. The good thing is, having just come back from a week in Austin, Texas, I daren't admit that to anybody when I'm in Austin, that I'm not a big fan of the Texas barbecue. So don't tell anybody. But yeah, sweaty, overspiced meat doesn't really do it for me.
I'm sure it'll be a secret. Yeah, be a secret to the hundreds of people who listen to this.
Yeah, it's the one. I think it's the one part of Americana I can't quite sort of switch myself over to yet. But do you know what? Give me 12 months, and I'm going to be all in. I'm going to be there.
We seem to have a bit of an affinity for the sports as well. You've told us about your American football fandom, and again, the Blue Jays. I was going to ask you about a little bit later, but might as well get onto it now. Obviously, it was that one weekend in Toronto what converted you. I saw it's on your story today. You seem to be a big fan of that too. Yeah,
so I had some family friends when I was younger from Canada, actually from the Toronto area, and we went out to visit them when I was really young, and so I had like a Blue Jays baseball and like a little shirt when I was probably 8 or 9. So I'd always, out of all the baseball teams, they were the only one as a kid that I really knew. And so going to my first baseball game, and it was the Blue Jays, was brilliant. So I was just like, right, well, this just makes loads of sense. This is going to be my team, and just lock in. That's it. Choice made. They're my team. Could have been a glory hunter. Could have gone and been a Dodgers fan or something. But no, I was like, I'm going to be a Blue Jays fan. Maybe I'm a lucky charm. I don't know. I can't say that. They were already having an amazing season. But super happy to see them in the World Series. And yeah, I've been a Seahawks fan since I was age dot, because my auntie lived in Seattle when I was little. So from age 1 to 15, every birthday and Christmas, I'd get sent Seahawks merch. So I'm a Seahawks fan through and through. Got a soft spot for the Colts. Turns out they're both having great starts to the season. So good times all round.
It's Daniel Jones, his influencer quarterback. Excellently named individual.
Well, Indiana Jones. That's the nickname. Yeah, brilliant stuff. But the hilarious thing was, I remember end of the season, we were all talking about, Arch Manning making his debut and on in college football, and how if he got rushed through, is he going to be is he going to be in the draft next year? And everyone expecting the Colts to do so badly that the Colts might have first dibs on Arch Manning, which would be obviously from a family perspective would be amazing. But the Colts are doing a bit too good. They're going to be quite far down the list for the draft.
It's funny, I've been a Tampa fan since I kind of picked up American football kind of 10 years or so ago. But I'm now finding myself having a bit of an affinity to the Colts, and it's kind of like, okay, I don't follow it religiously, but I'll check the Bucs results. But I'll also now check the Colts. I've got notifications on for both teams now. I kind of feel duty bound.
It's allowed, if you're an IndyCar, I think if you're an IndyCar journalist, broadcaster, driver, work for an IndyCar team, you've ever been to IMS, you're allowed to have a soft spot for the Colts. That's absolutely fine. Same with the Pacers. You're allowed. It's fine.
It's difficult for me because I've really gotten to basketball the last couple of years, and I support the Knicks. And they keep on playing each other too deep into the playoffs for me to have a soft spot for the Pacers, and the long-lasting rivalry makes it so difficult. So yeah, I kind of want to have a soft spot, but my hardcore fandom has got to say no. I've got to draw a line.
The banners in town during the 500 were great. It was it would beat the Knicks and kiss the bricks. It was very, very cool.
That's good. Yeah, just to get back onto some of the Fox stuff, get back on track.
Yeah.
I guess What do you see of some of the, I know you kind of mentioned there's a lot of things to address, but maybe some of the more glaring or the clearest areas that you are kind of putting your attention on this off season to kind of address going into 26? What kind of stands out for you?
Timing and scoring. That's a huge thing, and people won't know the sort of the complications that exist behind the scenes that made life complicated this year for the championship, for Fox, for everybody. It was a really difficult year. It wasn't just us at Fox that experienced some problems, and so that's something that we know is being looked at and is being worked on really, really, really hard through the winter, because that's something that we know everybody needs to be right. Heavens, we need it to be right in the booth. Otherwise, we can't tell everyone at home the story of what's going on. So that's a big thing, and that has been very, very clear. How we go about that and how we translate that to everybody is really, really important. For me, I need to work on myself and constantly improve what I'm doing. But there's lots of there's lots of little things around how we do things that we can tweak and improve and make better. And some of it will be stuff that you will notice. Some of it hopefully will be little things that you don't. But I think it's you don't want to change the recipe for the sake of it. It's got to be for the right reasons. So I think it's just seasoning at the moment.
I think we spoke about this mid-season, but I think one of the greatest things Fox did was really just bringing new additions. Whether it was the driver's eye or the drones or the pre-race show, whatever it was, these small things which I think really added up. And you obviously spoke about the start of the season, it being quite an open room, and everyone just contributed ideas towards this. So is there any ideas you're already looking at for 2026 in the future? Is there anything maybe in the works currently which you think could really add to the coverage further?
Oh, I can't tell you that. Ruin the surprise. But yes, it's a very open forum, and we've all got ideas. And what was really nice this year was, we had ideas, we brought them to Fox. They either liked them or they didn't like them, but those that they liked, they actioned immediately, and they became, a part of the broadcast. And working with an organization, working with a team that we have at Fox, who are open to ideas, who want to listen, who want to be open to suggestion, it's absolutely fantastic, because you feel valued, you feel that your ideas are valued and valuable, that they're listened to, that they're given the chance to succeed, and that's absolutely fantastic. And that goes for the whole of our immediate sort of IndyCar on Fox family, and right at the top, with Pam and with Mitch and Jacob Ullman, who really runs the show for us at IndyCar on Fox, but all the way up the ladder to Brad Zager, and right to the top of the tree to Eric Shanks. He is so open to ideas and always wants to hear the ideas that we have, and if he likes it, he'll greenlight it, and he'll just be like, go. Or whether it's the pre-show for the Indy 500 and Bill Richards, it's his baby. Bill's amazingly open to ideas as well. So just having a team of amazing professionals who have been there and done it, and done the biggest shows on earth, and have won sports Emmys, and have presented anything you can think of within sport. They've been there, they've done it, and they've knocked the socks off it. So to go to them with ideas, you're never scared of it, because they're going to give it the time of day and think about it and really give you some feedback. And if they like it, they'll make it happen and they'll make it work. And that's an amazing thing to have in broadcasting, because let me tell you, it's not always like that. It really isn't always like that. So yeah, I cannot tell you how wonderful it is to work for Fox and have all of those ideas, have them just say, yeah, that actually is, that one, maybe not so much, but this one, yes, let's do it. Let's run with it. And what that does is it promotes people to go away and think, what would I like to do? What are we missing? What can I bring that I'm not bringing at the moment? Where are my strengths that aren't being utilized? How can I do that more? And everybody just goes away and everyone's working on ideas. Everyone's working on whether it's concepts of things that need changing in the broadcast, or, they've got some wacky out there idea for a piece of shoulder content that they'd like to shoot, or a feature that they want to do for a part of a pre-race show, or, anything. You think of it and you say it to the guys, and, more often than not, they'll greenlight it. That's one of the best parts of this team.
And you mentioned it at the top. Obviously, in recent months, we saw the investment from Fox in Penske Entertainment, therefore IndyCar. So I guess just to discuss that a little bit, the first point I was kind of going to put to you was, what does this kind of say about Penske's faith and trust in Fox? Because we've not always seen that keenness to really kind of delegate. So how, I don't know, just what do you think of the trust that they have put in Fox, and in terms of, relying upon them to help the promotional side, to help grow the series? That's a big deal.
Yeah, it's absolutely massive. And, it speaks to what Roger said at the start of the season and what Eric said at the start of the season, which was that this was more than just a relationship between a championship and a broadcaster. And they said that right from the outset. And I know, a lot of people would just scoff at that and go, oh, everyone always says that, new deal. Everyone's making the most out of it that they can, and everyone's throwing flowers at each other. But it was real, from the outset. Eric Shanks is an Indiana boy. He has loved this championship his entire life, making a success of this series, taking IndyCar not just back to where it's been, but higher, better, more viewers, more popular than it has ever been. That's his goal. That's always been his goal. I think what this shows is it's not just an understanding of what needs to be done. It's an acceptance that, I think, on Roger's part and on the championship's part, it's looking at Fox and realizing they have a very specific set of skills and abilities within the world of promotions and marketing, and promoting sports, that we can utilize. And from Fox's part, it's saying this is something that we truly believe in and we want to help grow. And when you bring those two things together, the investment makes a huge amount of sense, from both sides. And I think it's absolutely wonderful. I think it's exactly the move that was needed at exactly the right time, because now Fox is, it's more than just a broadcaster. It's now, it's in for the long run, and it is invested both, in terms of an interest and a financial interest in making this thing as big as it can possibly be, and bringing to bear all of the experience, all of the know-how and the knowledge that they have, and bringing that into Penske Entertainment and helping them to grow the sport. It's you couldn't hope for a better partner than somebody who's willing to do that.
I think one element we really saw from day one was trying to make the drivers superstars. We saw it at the Super Bowl with the free adverts, which really helped sort of in the build up the momentum towards St. Petersburg. So how are Fox going to continue doing that? An advert's the first step, but how do you continue to build that year on year and make the superstars that you sort of get in F1 that we've really seen in the last couple of years? And what more opportunities do you think we'll see for drivers to sort of express themselves as superstars of their sport?
Yeah, I mean, it all comes with popularity, doesn't it? The more eyeballs you have on it, the more opportunities there is for us to hopefully hero these drivers. And we're only just getting started with that. We have to be better with that, and whether that is done via social media platforms, whether that is done via the broadcast itself, whether that's done during practice shows or the race, it's incumbent on us to tell their stories. And it's not always possible or easy to do that. You can't just shoehorn that into a race broadcast. It's quite difficult to do that in amongst all of the action. So, we have to tell those stories, and we have to tell them in a way that are going to be relatable, and that people are going to enjoy, and that people are going to want to follow them, and feel something for them. So that is yeah, that is something that obviously we said we would do. It's something that we started to do with those commercials, something that which we tried to do, week in, week out. But you can always do more. You can always do better. And thankfully now, with the various different arms of media as it exists, there are so many opportunities and so many avenues to be able to do that. And I'm sure you'll see, from 26 and beyond, quite a substantial sort of proliferation in the way in which we tell those stories.
At the time when we had this Penske Fox announcement, it's quite interesting to see Eric Shanks at the time sort of say IndyCar's got a year-round storytelling potential. But when you have a season which is only 6 months long, how do you sort of achieve that? Because the NFL is always going to be an obstacle. The NFL is always going to be the biggest sport in America. So, one, how do you go about that? And two, is it beneficial for a schedule to be longer if it competes against the NFL?
So it's obviously my first year. And having a 6-month off season was something which initially I just thought, oh, brilliant, get 6 months off. And then as I started to get into it, I was thinking, I really don't want 6 months off because I really love all the racing. And I really love the series and I wish it went on longer. And then we got to the end of the season. And actually, when you look at other sports and how they fare once the NFL kicks off, you wonder why they bother. Because nothing can hold a candle to it. The fact that the IndyCar Series starts pretty much the week after the Super Bowl and ends, either slightly before or in or around that first week of the NFL season, it's actually kind of mega, because you're placing yourself into an open window and you're not trying to go up against something that, for the most part, it's going to be very, very difficult to beat. So I kind of get it now, and I like it. But yes, the storytelling, and keeping those stories rolling through the off season is something that we have to do, and we have to do better. It's something that the championship has to do as well. Most other sports, most other championships have a couple of months, to formulate their plan for the off season. This is a 6-month off season. You almost sort of need to be working on that off season plan at the start of the season, such that when that season ends, you have your plan in place of how those next 6 months are approached. But with most of the seats already fixed, what I would love to see over the kind of the 6-month off season is going back through history, and utilizing the archive that IndyCar has, going through and telling the stories of not just some of the greats, but some of the more random moments or some of the great moments in history, and telling the story of how we got here, because this is a championship with a rich history. It has over 100 years of history, and those early years are quite confused and confusing. That's still, one thing I learned this year, going back and trying to work out the early years of, who was the champion and who did win these races. And so much is unclear, around kind of the very early years of AAA and, the pre-war stuff. I'd love to kind of get into the bones of that and figure out what really happened and start telling those stories. Because, this year we were talking about Alex, and we were talking about his incredible run and who it compared with. And, you can compare it with names that like a Mario Andretti or an AJ Foyt. But even for, an audience now, I still think we need to explain who was AJ Foyt, who was Mario Andretti, what did they do, what did they accomplish? Because, I will say this until I'm blue in the face. If you're a 12-year-old, it doesn't matter actually what age you are, and you're just getting into a sport, it's very difficult to compare and contrast with the greats of history if you never saw them do what they do. Like if you're just getting into football now and someone is talking about Dan Marino, you don't know who Dan Marino is. You never saw Dan Marino, right? If you're, I've made this comment before, if you're in the UK and you were watching Match of the Day, back in the day with Gary Lineker and Alan Shearer, you'd be like, why is the guy from the Crisp advert hosting this? Because you never saw him play for England, right? You don't know what you don't know. if you're just getting into soccer, you don't know who Pele was, you don't know who Maradona was. Similarly, if you're getting into IndyCar, we can't just expect you to know who the greats were. So I'd like to see a look back at the history to give greater context to what's going on in the present.
That's really interesting, because long-time listeners of the show will know that last off-season we attempted to actually give a bit of history every week, like a funny story from 1915, and it was a bit of a challenge at times. I think Archie will agree with me, but there's some incredible stories of somebody drinking wine halfway through the Indy 500 and somebody replacing a part from one of the cars in the car park. There's all sorts of incredible stories if you look far enough. So
yeah, the wine one stood out most to me. That was astonishing. Can you imagine that nowadays?
I love that. I love that.
Another aspect of the Fox investment, obviously, I think there were three key bullet points kind of in the press release from what I remember. And one of them was creating what was described as entertainment events. So in your eyes, why is it important to have these sort of marquee events from both an in-person perspective, but also kind of a TV perspective as well? Like, why is that such a significant aspect of it?
I remember the COVID years of Formula One when we raced with nobody in the grandstands, and it was very depressing. So it will come as no shock to say that, packed out grandstands make the show look better. Having every single seat in the house full for the Indy 500 was mega, and the place looked incredible. So yeah, making these events and, having people turn up is important. Iowa this year looked awful. It looked dreadful, but that's what happens when you don't promote your own race, which made no sense to me, but there we go. Having these events be proper big events is, it's part and parcel of growing the championship. I think, you look at Nashville and look at the way that they promoted that race from the airport to being downtown, and there being banners on every single lamppost, and they did a proper job of promoting that event, and they got a really good turnout as a result. So I'm excited to see the future. I'm excited to see what Arlington does, because I think Arlington is going to change the game in terms of what people will come to expect from an IndyCar race weekend. I've spoken to the promoters there. They've got a lot planned. And just from, I think, how the weekend is going to go down, I think it has the potential to be something a little different. And I think something that people are really going to enjoy.
And that leads us nicely, actually, to looking at the rest of the 2026 calendar, because you say we've got Arlington, new marquee event that was announced when Fox first came into the fold, but we've now got this NASCAR doubleheader at Phoenix. We're moving over to Markham. We've got that World Cup final lead into Nashville, hopefully a bit under lights as well. So is there anything there you're really particularly looking forward to?
I think the spacing of the season is much better. I know there's still a little bit of a gap at the start where maybe we could have seen a Mexico or something like that would have been great. But listen, getting an oval in before Indy, which I know was always the norm before, that's good. It's good to have that back. Great to have that doubleheader at Phoenix. Super excited for that. But yeah, just the general kind of ebb and flow of the season, I think it runs a little better. Not having those big gaps. So I'm very, very excited for that. I think Markham, as you guys were saying, that has a lot of interest for me to see how that one rolls out, and really looking forward to it. St. Pete is a great season opener, and then Nashville straight after the World Cup final. I mean, we had a great race there this year, and hopefully we carry some of those football fans come over as well.
It'll be a great day, won't it? Because England will win the World Cup. We'll go straight into the World Cup final. We're speaking to Louis Foster. He said he wouldn't paint his car with an English flag on it, so we still have some work to do in convincing him to do that.
I mean, I might go and put a sticker on it for him.
Yeah.
I'll do that. I will guarantee, if England win the World Cup final, I will come on air wearing an England shirt. Don't worry about it. It'll happen.
We need a lot of references in the commentary as well.
There we go. I think, yeah, you'll have a fight. I think, there'll have to be they think it's all over. Something like that.
Yeah, that would be brilliant. Yeah, so it's interesting with the whole deal with IndyCar and the investment, that entertainment is obviously Fox's forte, and I think IndyCar's very lucky by the fact that it's largely entertaining as its kind of raw self anyway. But how do you, from the Fox side of things, walk that line of creating entertainment but not kind of overstepping the mark on the sporting side of things? I know people always bring up playoffs, for instance. So what is that balance? How do you strike that sort of balance?
Well, I mean, we were just talking about football, weren't we? You know, and playoffs seem to me to be something that was brought in to try to keep interest in NASCAR once the football season had started, to try to, to bring those numbers up again. Look, I think IndyCar has always been about showing the strength of a driver over the course of a season, and over the course of multiple different disciplines in terms of racetrack. That is road track, street track, super speedways, short ovals. To introduce a playoff system that didn't include all types of circuit, to include a playoff system that didn't include the result of the Indianapolis 500, I think would be quite strange. I don't know what the future holds, but I'm a purist in that I would like to see, and I believe that racing championships should be the result of an entire season and not just a snapshot of that season. But I'm also a realist that, things change, but I hope they don't.
And the final strand of the deal is sort of that digital strategy and focus on immersive content. And you've spoken to us before about how that really was sort of your background in F1 and Liberty and really trying to grow the sport that way. So from a Fox side, what does that entail? Are there any sort of goals on the digital side that Fox plan to bring in the next couple of years?
You would need to speak to the digital department about that. I can give you their number. Yeah, look, it's a massive part of it. It is a massive part of it. But as with everything, it's about building up those teams and building up those departments and putting them into a position where they can start to do that. And that's twofold. That's both with us at Fox, and of course it's for the championship themselves, for IndyCar. And they have a pretty lean operation over there, and I think they do a wonderful job with the staff that they have. But I think it's a two-pronged attack. It has to be Fox as broadcaster, and it has to be IndyCar as series, that really start to push things from a digital perspective, and bring it to new potential eyeballs on social. That's where we're gonna get new eyeballs from. It can't just be through your traditional linear methods. It has to be utilizing the biggest tool globally that exists, and that's digital. So how we do that, time will tell. But there's some things in the pipework, working on that. But yeah, I think it's a twofold thing for Fox and IndyCar, to move forward together, to complement one each other, and work together on that.
And just thinking back to earlier when you were talking about the numbers, and I think another thing that came from that was the real shift in the demographic, even in this first year with Fox. So I guess you kind of touched on it there, and you're probably very familiar from the F1 side as well. But what is the best way? I know you mentioned social media, for instance, to really engage those younger fans. And why do you think immediately in this first year of Fox as well, that was something that really noticeably kind of adjusted for the better?
That's a great question. I think honestly, having everything in one place, every race in one place, there was certainty. You never had to search for it. If you wanted to watch an IndyCar race and you knew it was going to be on Fox. And I think that was a real strength for the series. And I don't think you can, you can't overstate it, how important that is. When almost every other sport, you are flicking around trying to find out, which channel it's on at any given time. So to have everything in one place, I think was huge. There was a drive on social, and that is where you're going to find new eyeballs. Always where you're going to find new eyeballs. I think the Super Bowl adverts, did a great job, and then the commercials that were being run on Fox Sports, on FS1, on FS2, on Fox itself throughout the season, helping to draw in people who might not otherwise have been watching. I think the shift in demographic is part of a wider trend within motorsport, as you said, towards younger people. Massive increase in young women watching as well, which is fabulous news. And that's across motorsport. That's not just F1. It's not just IndyCar. It's across motorsport. But I think we're in a potentially really strong period, not just for IndyCar, but for open wheel racing in America at the moment. Formula One continues to go from strength to strength. IndyCar has had an incredibly strong first season on Fox. When I was in Austin this week, it was lovely because everybody every fan that I met and that I spoke to, some of them would say, "Oh, we really miss you on F1, but we've been watching IndyCar." And the others would open up by saying, "We really enjoyed watching IndyCar this year." So I found that pretty astonishing because I was kind of expecting a lot of people in Austin to be like, "Hey, where did you go this year?" But they didn't. They all knew. They were all already watching. And yes, okay, you've got a bit of a captive audience there because they're paying to go to a Formula One race, so you would expect they're pretty much locked in with open wheel racing. But it still surprised me because F1 can be sort of keep itself to itself a little bit. So the fact that the F1 fan base, certainly that I met at the race this weekend, the fact that they've embraced IndyCar and that they've come over and a huge number, certainly from those that I met, are watching, is a massively positive thing. So I think we're in a great place over in the US to take advantage of that and really grow that audience.
Brilliant. And we just wanted to get onto a couple of the talking points that we've had this off season before we kind of get towards the wrapping up stage. So, I mean, it's a very, very big one. But first off, what's your view on the whole Herta, Power, Malukas trifecta of events? Obviously, Herta now announced to be going to F2. You've got Power leaving Penske and Malukas with massive boots to fill. I mean, the floor is yours.
Where to start? I admire Colton. I admire his drive, the massive gamble that he's taking in walking away from what we understand to be the biggest contract in IndyCar to go and race in Formula 2 in an attempt to get a super license, to go and race for a team which will be brand new in Formula 1 and very young if and when he gets that super license to actually go and compete for it. It's risky, man. It's really risky. He doesn't know the tracks, doesn't know the car. Tires are the big thing. Everyone he's racing against will either have already raced in F2 and know the circuits and the tires. They would have raced in F3 and they'll know the tires. Those Pirellis are tricky. And I'm not convinced that Colton, out of everybody that I've seen in IndyCar, I wouldn't say he was the number one driver that I would put down. If you said who's got the best tire feel in IndyCar, I wouldn't have put Colton at the top of the list. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how he fares. But I wish him nothing but success. And I really, you've got to admire people chasing their dreams and going after what they want and genuinely sacrificing, getting out of the comfy seat and going to do what they wish to do. Will Andretti, I really hope it gives him just that burst, that kind of lease of life, and sees him jump back into title contention. I mean, let's not forget, he's the only guy to beat Alex Palou to a title in the last 5 years. So still got it. Very excited to see what he does. And of course, Malukas into his seat, not a surprise to anybody. He couldn't contain himself or look anything other than sheepish when we asked him about it in the media days in January, right? Like, it's been coming since then. We've all known it. So it's the start of what I think could be quite a big shakeup over at Penske, because there's, Joseph's contract, we believe, ends at the end of next year. And again, as we understand it, there's no guarantee that gets a continuation. So, could we have two of the biggest names out at Penske within 2 seasons? Renus at JHR, that's a big one as well. I thought, and actually, I thought it was fascinating that at the end of the season, Renus literally, while all of this was going on, posted, "I'm not going back to Dale Coyne." It was like, well, okay, that's interesting. Well, you must have a seat, but he hadn't signed yet. But now he's got the JHR seat. So that's a very, very interesting one, and it's going to be fascinating to see how they fare. That team is again a team that's building and growing. Can't wait to see what Dennis Hauger does. Big fan of his, and he's been absolutely dominant in Indy Next. Rumors around who will be at Foyt. Colette is rumored to be, pretty much there. I saw Romain Grosjean in Austin, and I said, "So, Coyne next year?" And he said to me, "Everybody thinks it, but it's not done." And I was like, "Oh, okay." He said, "If Dale sends me a contract, I'll sign it." So that's the latest that I know on that.
I feel like this driving market's moved quite quickly in comparison to previous years. You've only probably got about 3 or 4 seats left to fill out, and we haven't even reached the end of October yet. But
and then there's the Mick Schumacher thing.
Exactly. Which is my exactly next point. Like,
oh, was it? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, it's like, well, no, but Mick Schumacher from Formula 1, Formula 2.
Yeah.
He's got, the background for him, and he's gone to World Endurance Championship last couple of years. The route to F1 is looking a bit bleaker for him because we know that was his ambition. So from his perspective, is IndyCar a good move for him? And I guess from an IndyCar's perspective, would it be a great move for him to move over too?
Look, getting the Schumacher name to IndyCar would be absolutely huge. From a commercial standpoint, absolutely massive. I don't think that Formula One was ever really the right place for Mick because a couple of things. Number one, the shadow, that he could never hope to step out of his father. Nobody other than Lewis Hamilton has been able to, match the level of success of Michael Schumacher. And for anybody to hope to get even close, they're dreaming. Everyone's dreaming, let alone having the extra weight of being Mick. It was always going to be hard for him. But I don't think F1 was ever really the right place for him because the cars change so much and so quickly. And if you look at Mick's career, in pretty much every championship he ever did, year one, he was nowhere. Year two, first half of the season, pretty sketch. And then second half, something just clicked and he understood the car and would run to the title. So, with a car that's changing all the time, a driver who needs time to adapt themselves to the car is never going to be able to keep up with that rate of progression. So I think putting him into a championship like IndyCar, where the cars remain, pretty much as is, but for setup changes and whatever they can change from a damper perspective year on year, and the marginal gains they can make, but for the most part, pretty set in stone. That for a driver like Mick, I think plays to his strengths, that he will be able to bed himself in year one. He won't be spectacular. He never is. But then year two, when he gets to grips with the car, as we saw in every junior formula he ever ran, 4, 3, 2, that second year, bam, unlocks it, gets it in. I think a year two IndyCar Mick could be something really fun to watch. And obviously, junior championships through Europe, you have to progress when you win the title. IndyCar, let's hope that we see him go year 2, year 3, year 4, and continue that progression, continue that improvement, with that car. I think it could be brilliant. If I had his ear, I would say move. I would say go. Don't even think about it. Take the move and jump. I think it would be great. But as I said, I wouldn't expect miracles from him in year 1, but year 2, if his junior career is anything to go by, that's when we'll see him unlock the car.
Something we've got into a habit of asking some of our guests as well is, what rule would you change in IndyCar? For instance, Louis Foster said that he would he would make it so there was a different car for ovals and road and street courses, which obviously is not particularly feasible. But that's just an
Well, like a
example of how
completely different
outlandish.
car.
Yes. Because he said that he'd been on the phone with Lockie Hughes, who tested an IndyCar and had been a bit underwhelmed by the weight of it.
Yes.
So
Well,
that was his idea.
okay. Where do you want me to start? Am I only allowed one?
You can
Oh, you can have as many if you want.
All right. First fix. Let's get a 2.4 litre V8 engine in it, and let's get there before Formula One does, because they're dragging their heels. So they're probably going to move there for 31. We're going to have a new car in 28. Let's get a 2.4 litre V8. Let's make it scream. And let's get it in there before F1 does. And with GM and Honda on board, they'll be running a 2.4 litre V8 before they do in F1. So the potential for other OEMs to maybe want to make a move over to IndyCar would open up, because why would they want their rivals doing it when they can't? So does Ford want to enter? Does Mercedes maybe want to say hi? I don't know. Maybe, possibly. Run them on methanol. Get 1,000 horsepower out of them. That'll sort out your power to weight ratio issue. And then the cars are terrifying, and they'll be running like they were in the early 2000s. So that's what I do in the short term. That would be my fix. Can you imagine 33 of them screaming around the Indianapolis Motor Speedway?
Amazing.
Yes, please. Yes, please. And it's easy, it's not a difficult thing. Failing that, just slam downforce on the car. Downforce doesn't cost you anything. You want fast cars on road and street courses, just put tunnels underneath them, and slap more downforce on them. And let's go, and let's get fast lap times. But for the most part, I think, sort out your power to weight ratio, get engines that scream again, and the car can still be, as heavy as an elephant as it is now. But you take yourself over 1,000 horsepower, and the power to weight ratio would be the same as it was in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then we're talking. We're talking. What else would there was something that got me this year about the wave around, but I can't remember what it was. That annoyed me.
It's going from two different ends. The new cars go away.
Yeah, but I can't really remember. What else would I change? Oh, I don't know. Not a lot. I love it. I really love it.
There we go.
It's such a great championship, and it's so much fun. But you need a new car, and you need more power, and you need to fix the power to weight ratio. Make it scream. Make it sound scary. I was talking to Juan Pablo Montoya about it the weekend, and and he just said the same thing. Make them hard to drive, up the power to weight ratio, and his exact words were, make them fucking scary. And I can't disagree with that. If they that's the Juan Pablo Montoya quote. If you get that sound right, that V10 or V8, whatever you want, stick it in there. You get that scream, and the driver, the heroism of the drivers, is doubled, because if they sound terrifying, then they look terrifying, and then the drivers, their heroism is just, it's just built so much on that basis. But sound is desperately important. So yeah, let's go 2.4 litre V8 before Formula One does it. Let's run them on methanol. Let's go crazy.
Just looking at a more personal side, Will, just as we look at ending off, we saw on your Instagram story now 100 days sober. So I just really wanted to find out, what prompted you to make that decision, and have you found the journey of the last 100 days?
I've got lots of friends who gave up drinking, and they keep saying, it's really good. You should give it. You should try it. And I was halfway through the year. I was in. It was when we were in that really busy month in July. And I just thought, you know what? I'm not gonna have a glass of wine with dinner tonight. And then the next day I was like, I'm not going to have a glass of wine with dinner tonight either. And just kind of thought it's about my health, and it's about, yeah, at first it was just like trying to prove to myself that I could do it, because it kind of just becomes a thing. And particularly, when you're on the road, and if you're on the road all the time, then you're always eating out. And if you're always eating out, then it's really easy to just go like, oh yeah, I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll have 2 glasses of wine or whatever with dinner. To the extent that then that's every night. So I just thought I should probably take stock of my life and try to look after myself a bit better. Maybe that's why I have the belly that I do, because I replaced the sugar that I was getting in through alcohol with Twinkies and Twizzlers. I've always been a sugar fiend anyway, but no, I'm just trying to be a bit healthier, trying to look after myself and make good choices. But what that's done in the meantime of, just thinking about it from a health perspective more than anything is I've started to reappraise my relationship with alcohol, and, do I need it? Do I want it? I miss a good glass of red wine, but the thing is I don't need one anymore. It's not, I don't sit there going, oh, have to have one. Yeah. And I'm not missing it at all, which is really good. And I posted that thing, I don't know, just because I hit 100 days, and I was just like, honestly, I was a bit chuffed. I'd done it. I just got this wave of messages on social from people doing the same thing. And people who have been, haven't had a drink in 2 years or 3 years or 4 years or 5, or others who were thinking about it, other people who really sort of recognize that they need to do it because they're kind of struggling with it. And others who are kind of trying and failing. And so there was a real breadth of reach out from people. Then it makes you kind of realize that it is quite front and center with people's minds. And yet also it's something that's still kind of quite taboo for some reason to talk about. But just as with, our mental health, and hopefully people realize now they can open up and talk about their mental health. If you don't want to have a drink, your mates are going to be way cooler about it than you think. No one's going to try and force you into having a drink if you don't want to have a drink. And if they do, then they're probably not your mates. And they don't, they probably don't actually care that much about you. It's more about them at that point, because nobody should be forcing you into that. I've had nothing but support from my friends, and same thing. And, I saw Hinch in Austin, and he was just like, you still haven't had a drink? And I was like, no, mate, like 100 days. He was like, that's amazing. And I managed to go through Nashville, right? I did the week in Nashville, didn't have a drink. I went to see Oasis, didn't have a drink. Just did the week in Austin, didn't have a drink. And it's great. I feel mega. And there are so many good options out there, like the non-alcoholic beer options are fantastic. Non-alcoholic wines are truly dreadful, but for the most part, I haven't found a good one yet. But send
your recommendations to Will. Anyone who drinks a nice non-alcoholic wine.
Anybody who has a good non-alcoholic wine that doesn't just taste like sugary, grape juice, please send them over. But yeah, I think that's the most important thing is and one of the reasons I put it out there was just so if anyone's thinking about it, to give it a go, because it's not taboo anymore, and it shouldn't be taboo to not be drinking. And actually, the one thing I've found is how supportive everybody is if you decide that you want to do that thing. Will I ever have a glass of wine again? Maybe. I don't know. I just wanted to see if I could do it. Then it's been 100 days, and so far so good. So let's see. Let's go another 100.
That's very, very powerful stuff. I just wanted to actually mention something you brought up there, Oasis. How was it?
Oh, it was mega. Because you guys know I was supposed to go Mid-Ohio weekend.
Oh, really?
Yeah, well, that's why my intro to practice I don't know if you recall, but my intro to practice in Mid-Ohio contained 16 Oasis references in the first 30 seconds of
So
the show.
that was the weekend. I think I was at Silverstone that weekend.
Oh,
But Dan's mocked me for it. I did watch back every single session from that weekend.
well, yes, I got 16 Oasis references in the first 30 seconds of the broadcast. I was supposed to go then, but my lovely British agent managed to get me tickets to go and see them on the last night of the first leg of the tour at Wembley, and it was ace. It was really, really good. Really, really good. 18 years after I first saw them at Wembley Arena, so just around the corner.
Oh wow.
Yeah, very cool, man. It was
Nice.
it was awesome. It was awesome.
And just to kind of wrap up, what does the rest of your off season look like? I'm guessing things will probably get busy in a couple of weeks if they're not already busy enough.
Yes. Baby is due in 2 weeks, so it's going to get very, very busy indeed. And I'm in the middle of moving house, so for like the third time in 2 months. So yes, we sold our house, so we had to move out of that, moved into an Airbnb, which we were in for 3 weeks. Now we've moved into a rental place. We move out of here once the house has gone through, and we've finally completed the sale on that. But we can't really think too much about that because baby's due in 2 weeks, and then it's Christmas, and then it's pre-season media days in Indianapolis, and then it's St. Pete, and then we're there. So it's going to be here before we know it, boys.
Oh, wow.
I love that spirit. I love it. We need to do it on this podcast when we were struggling in the middle of December trying to cook together a Christmas special. So
Well, when you put it that way, it's a really short off season.
exactly.
There's barely any of it left, guys.
It's been 2 months already, and I haven't even realised.
There you go. That's it.
That's a nice positive tone to it. We usually end off on a bombshell Top Gear style, but I think we'll end off on a nice thoughtful note.
Lovely.
We're getting there. So Will, thanks for joining us again. The time with us has been much appreciated multiple times
You're
this year. So yeah, thanks for coming on. You're invited back anytime you wish to be on. I'm sure, as I said, once we get to February, we'll be struggling a little bit with our weekly episodes, but we'll power our way through.
No problem at all. Let's lock one in. I'm not going to say this year because I will be up to my ears in nappies. But early next year, boys. Let's do it.
Yeah. Good luck with the family over the next couple of weeks.
Thanks, guys.
We'll speak to you soon.